Okay. And state your name.
My name is Clara Fashion.
Okay.
I was born in Sumter County, South Carolina, on July 23rd, 1930, to William Ted and Louise Morant Hale.
All right.
I enjoyed a wonderful childhood because I grew up on a big farm, and there was always somebody around to be company for you. You never had to be alone. You always had somebody waiting in the wings. And I grew up very close to my grandparents because when I was 7 years old, we moved like on the same plot of land that they lived on, and we saw each other all during the day. As a matter of fact, we could almost yell from each other's house in conversation. So I enjoyed that. And my father was a strict father.
And when was he born?
He was born on January 27th, 1908. My mother was born on May 23rd, 1910. So they were quite young. They were young parents when I was born, and they were, I would say, they have always been overprotective of us. We never had to stay in the house during a storm, or when night came, we never was left alone. They always sent us to our grandparents' house to wait until they got home, and they were very protective that way. My grandfather and my grandmother was superb.
And what were your grandmother
My
and grandfather's
grandfather's name was Dobie Hale.
And when was he born?
And he was born in, I think it was, 1881. I can't remember. I don't know why I can't remember the date this morning, because my grandmother was born on September 18th. Now, I'm not quite sure of which year she was born in, but
I think it was 1878.
Well, I don't know. I'm being told that it was 1878, but I'm not too sure. But I know my grandfather was born. Oh, his birthday was April 16th, 1981. He was he had several brothers and sisters, which he was sort of like he sort of watched over them like a parent, although he wasn't the oldest one. He seemed to have been the strongest one because he was a man who worked who ran a farm and worked on the Southern Railway system as a laborer for over 30 years. And that was the only person that I knew at the time who had retired and was from a job and was getting a pension. And a lot of you would be surprised as to know what his pension amounted to. When he got his pension, he was getting $30.25 a month. Then in later years, it went up to $55. So he had that role of being a farmer. So we never went without anything. there was always something there for us, and we had a beautiful, beautiful life because there was an abundance of whatever he planted. He seemed to have had a good hand to for it to just flourish.
Mm-hmm. And what did you all call him?
We called him Babe,
Mm-hmm.
and we called my grandmother Grandma.
All right. Tell me about Grandma.
Well, Grandma she was a little woman who loved her grandchildren, but I've always felt as though it was 5 of us that turned out to be favorites, and that was my sister and Stella and myself, who was the Louise and Ted's children, and then there was Geraldine and Bubba, and another person that they raised too was Viola. Viola's father was killed in 1924, and when her mother remarried, they refused to have her being governed by the second husband, so they kept her and raised her as their own.
Okay.
So
you all kind of grew up like a close...
We all grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
We all grew up together. We saw each other daily and stayed in and out of the house.
Okay.
We spent nights at the house.
So
It was just...
it sounds like your parents they had a lot of siblings. You mind telling me about your father's siblings?
Well, my father was the 4th child. He had twin sisters, a brother, and then he came. Then he had another sister whose name was Elizabeth. He had another sister whose name was Hattie. Then he had a brother whose name was James Benjamin, and a sister whose name was Lucille.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up in a large household.
Mm-hmm. And the first 2 sisters were
Twins.
And their names.
Cornelia and Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And then Levi.
Mm-hmm.
Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Lizzie. Hattie. Booger. And Seal.
Okay. All right. And your Grandma Louise?
Mama had a large family also. Her father's name was Harrison Mayrant, and his wife's name was Elizabeth Dinkins Mayrant. She died when my mother was 14 years old. But there was quite a number of children there. There was Straughter, Bessie, Louise, Willie, Wilhelmina, Eva, Edna, and Marie.
Okay.
So it was quite a number of children.
Okay.
Who that grew up in that household.
Okay. Was there a Harrison the third?
No, Harrison. His name was Son. We called him Son.
Okay.
And he was the I think he was about the 5th child. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So you had a pretty big extended family too.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about Sumter.
I don't know that much about Sumter other than we went there for special occasions.
Okay. Well,
when I was a child, I contacted eye disease when I was about 5 or 6. And then I had to be under doctor's care, and it sort of disappeared until I was 9. And then when I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with cataract. They did in-office surgery on me in a series of 5 operations. And then when they got finished with the left eye, they went to the right eye and did 4. Back in 46, I developed the cloudiness of that left eye and had to have the 5th operation on it, but it never came. It never cleared up.
Okay.
So I've had poor vision practically all of my life.
Okay. All right. You know, when I said Sumter, I know you were born in Sumter County.
Sumter County, which was about 15 miles away from the city.
Okay.
Maybe a little more than 15, because now they've extended the city limits way out now, as opposed to what it used to be when I was growing up.
Okay. But the actual place that you were born, what was the name of that place?
The place that I was born, they say in Statesburg Township, but it was closer to a little place called Horatio, about a mile away from that little place.
Okay.
Which only housed 3 stores and some houses. It wasn't a town at all. It was just a little country cluster.
Okay. All right. Now, just a few more questions. Tell me about your schooling.
I started school when I was 4 years old, and that first school I went to name was Hiawatha.
Okay. And
I went there a year, and then I was they transferred me to a little school called Westbury, where I completed the 7th grade. And then when I left, because it only went as high as 7th grade, and when I left Westbury, I went to High Hill.
Okay.
And High Hill wasn't a complete high school, so you still had to go away to get that last year. And I got started in 1946 to Mather Academy. But I only went to Mather Academy something like 6 weeks. And then that's when I started having eye trouble again. And I did not return after I got finished with the operation and with the doctor that time.
Okay. All right. And your church?
My church was Good Hope United Methodist Church.
Okay.
Which was too far away to walk. So we only got there, got to Good Hope occasionally. We would pretty much go on the second Sunday, but very rarely until I was grown did we get there on the full Sunday, because they only had two services a month. And we used to go to a little church that you could walk to. You call that church is Willow Grove, which still exists today. And we would go there on first and third Sundays because it wasn't a problem to walk to that church. But to Good Hope, you wouldn't be able to walk because you wouldn't get there in time for the service. It was so far away.
Okay. You know, I think I asked you to tell me about everybody except your mother.
She was a person who did who was very talented, who was I said the best cook. And she could look at a dress and make one just like it. She never used patterns. She knew how to fold the material, and she could just come up with the dress. And she was just an all around woman. I mean, it wasn't any heavy work and stuff to be done on the farm. She could do it. Mm-hmm. She wasn't as people used to say, left-handed at all. She could do it all.
Okay.
And my grandparents, my father's parents, I don't think they had a daughter that they like any better than they liked my mother, because she was just. Well, they just thought she was the best.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.